They say arrogance is the most expensive luxury in the world. Ethan Blackwood was about to find out exactly what that cost. He sat in that Manhattan high-rise, swirling his scotch, looking at the ink drying on the divorce papers. He thought he had just tricked his quiet, stay-at-home wife out of $500 million. He thought he was the shark. He thought he was the king. But when he walked into the boardroom the next morning to meet the anonymous majority shareholder capable of firing him, he didn't see a stranger. He saw the woman he just discarded. And she wasn't signing checks anymore. She was signing his termination letter. The air in the penthouse on 57th Street always smelled like expensive lily-of-the-valley and cold ambition. Ethan Blackwood adjusted his silk tie in the mirror, catching the reflection of his wife, Charlotte, sitting on the edge of the bed. She looked tired. She always looked tired these days. She was wearing that beige cardigan he hated, the one that made her look like a librarian rather than the wife of New York's most aggressive tech mogul. "I'm going to be late, Charlotte," Ethan said, not turning around. "The merger with Kincaid Logistics is entering the final stage. Don't wait up." Charlotte looked up, her blue eyes surprisingly sharp for someone who had barely spoken 3 words at breakfast. "Are you coming home for dinner? It's our anniversary, Ethan. 12 years. Ethan suppressed a sigh, grabbing his platinum Patek Philippe watch from the dresser. "I told you I have the board meeting. Order in. Buy yourself something nice with the black card. Just don't nag me today. I need my head in the game." He walked out without kissing her goodbye. He didn't see the way her hand tightened on the bedsheet, or the way she picked up her phone the second the elevator doors dinged shut. Down in the lobby, Ethan's mood shifted instantly. He pulled out his phone and tapped out a message to Sienna Tate, his executive assistant, and the woman he'd been sleeping with for the past 2 years. "Paperwork is ready. I'm doing it tonight." "Champagne at the Pierre at 8? Sienna replied instantly with a heart emoji. "Finally. I want a ring that blinds people, Ethan." Ethan smirked as he stepped into the back of his waiting Mercedes Maybach. He felt invincible. Blackwood Dynamics was valued at $850 million. He was the face, the brain, and the heavy hand of the company. Charlotte? Charlotte was a relic of his past. She was the daughter of a quiet antique dealer he'd met in college before he made his millions. She was sweet, unassuming, and frankly boring. She didn't fit the brand anymore. He had spent 6 months working with his lawyer, Harrison Peel, to construct the perfect exit strategy. They had moved assets, created shell companies in the Caymans, and drafted a divorce settlement that looked generous on the surface. $2 million and the Hamptons house, but was actually a pittance compared to his true net worth. He was going to cut her loose, marry Sienna, and take Blackwood Dynamics public. "To the office?" "Mr. Blackwood?" the driver asked. "No," Ethan said, staring at the skyline. "Take me to Peel's office first. I need to make sure the ink is ready." He didn't know it yet, but the city he was looking at didn't belong to him. It never had. The law offices of Peel, Sterling, and Associates were quiet. The mahogany table in the conference room was long enough to land a plane on. Ethan sat at the head, tapping his pen. Opposite him sat Charlotte. She had arrived 10 minutes early, accompanied not by a lawyer, but by a single, thin man in a grey suit who looked more like an accountant than a shark. His name was Arthur. Ethan had never seen him before. "So," Ethan started, using his best boardroom voice. "You've read the terms, Charlotte. It's more than fair. You get the beach house. You get a monthly stipend. You keep the jewelry. In exchange, I keep the business assets and the city apartment, and we waive any further claims on each other's future earnings." Charlotte sat with her hands folded in her lap. She wasn't crying. That surprised him. He expected tears. He expected begging. "Ethan," she said softly, "are you sure this is what you want? Once we sign this, there is no going back. The division of assets becomes irrevocable." "I'm sure, Charlotte," Ethan snapped, feigning hurt. We've grown apart. I need someone who keeps up with my pace. You deserve a simpler life. This gives you that." He slid the papers across the table. "Just sign on the dotted line, and you're a free woman." Harrison Peel, Ethan's lawyer, smirked from the corner. "It's a standard separation agreement, Mrs. Blackwood. Very generous." "One." Charlotte looked at the papers. Then she looked at Arthur, the grey-suited man. Arthur gave a microscopic nod. "Okay, Ethan," Charlotte said. Her voice dropped an octave. It wasn't the voice of the tired housewife anymore. It was cold. "If you want the business, you can have the business entity. I'll sign." She picked up the pen and signed her name with a flourish. Charlotte Kensington. She didn't use Blackwood. Ethan felt a rush of adrenaline so potent it was almost sexual. He grabbed the papers the moment she finished, signing his own name aggressively. Ethan Blackwood. "Done," Ethan exhaled, standing up and buttoning his jacket. "Harrison will file these in the morning. I'll have your things moved to the Hamptons by the weekend." He turned to leave, already mentally popping the cork on the Dom Perignon with Sienna. "Ethan?" Charlotte called out. He stopped at the door, his hand on the brass handle. "What now?" "Don't forget the board meeting tomorrow," she said. "The majority shareholder is flying in to discuss the restructuring." Ethan laughed. "Charlotte, I am the majority shareholder. I own 51% of the voting stock. I'm just meeting with the investors to tell them the good news about us. Go home." He walked out. Charlotte remained in the chair. Arthur, the quiet man, opened his briefcase. "Did he read the appendix on page 40, Mrs. Kensington?" Arthur asked dryly. "Ethan never reads the fine print, Arthur," Charlotte said, standing up and smoothing her skirt. "He only looks at the headlines. Prepare the car. I have a company to reclaim." The next morning, Blackwood Dynamics was buzzing. Rumors of the IPO were flying. Ethan walked through the glass doors like a god. He high-fived his VP of sales, winked at the receptionist, and walked straight into his office where Sienna was waiting. She was wearing a dress that was technically appropriate for the office, but tight enough to cause a traffic accident. She shut the door and kissed him. "Is it done?" she whispered. "Signed, sealed, and delivered." Ethan grinned. "She's out. The company is mine. All of it. We're rich, babe. Real rich." "Mr. Blackwood?" The intercom buzzed. It was his secretary, Mrs. Higgins. She sounded terrified. "What is it? I said no interruptions until the board meeting. Sir, the board is gathered, and the representative for the Kensington Trust is here. They're demanding you start the meeting now." Ethan frowned. "The Kensington Trust? They only hold a 5% stake. Since when do they demand anything?" "I don't know, sir, but the chairman is with them." Ethan adjusted his cuffs. "Fine. I'll go in there and put them in their place. Probably some old money trying to flex." He walked into the main conference room. The entire board of directors was there. 12 men and women in dark suits, looking uncharacteristically pale. At the head of the table, where Ethan usually sat, the chair was turned away, facing the window that overlooked Central Park. "Excuse me," Ethan boomed, walking to the head of the table. "I believe you're in my seat." The room was dead silent. Harrison Peel, his lawyer, was sitting in the corner, sweating profusely. He wouldn't meet Ethan's eyes. "Harrison?" Ethan asked. "What's going on?" The chair at the head of the table slowly swiveled around. Ethan's jaw dropped. It was Charlotte. But it wasn't the Charlotte in the beige cardigan. She was wearing a sharp, tailored white suit that screamed power. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She wore diamond studs that cost more than Ethan's car, and on the table in front of her wasn't a knitting basket. It was a stack of legal files. "Hello, Ethan," she said. Her voice was steady, commanding. "Please take a seat. We have a lot to get through." "What are you doing here?" Ethan laughed nervously, looking around the room for support. "Gentlemen, why is my ex-wife in the chairman's seat? Is this a joke?" "It's no joke, Mr. Blackwood," said Arthur, the grey-suited man from the day before, standing by the window. As of 9 a.m. this morning, when the divorce papers were filed, the ownership structure of Blackwood Dynamics was clarified. Clarified. I own 51%. Ethan slammed his hand on the table. Correction, Charlotte said, opening a blue folder. You owned 51% of Blackwood Management LLC, but Blackwood Management doesn't own the patents, the IP, or the real estate. Those are owned by the Kensington Trust. Ethan froze. What? When you started this company 12 years ago, Charlotte continued, her eyes locking onto his, you had no money. My father, Lord Kensington, funded you. But he didn't trust you, Ethan. He never did. So he put the core assets in a trust in my name. You had the operating rights only as long as we were married. The room spun. Ethan looked at Harrison. Is this true? Harrison wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. I missed it, Ethan. It was buried in the original incorporation documents from a decade ago. It's a matrimonial clause. The operational license is revocable upon divorce. So, Charlotte stood up. She looked 10 feet tall. You signed the divorce papers, Ethan. You voluntarily severed the legal tie that allowed you to run this company. The Kensington Trust is now exercising its right to revoke the license. You can't do this, Ethan screamed. I built this. I am Blackwood Dynamics. You're an employee, Ethan, Charlotte said, tossing a single piece of paper toward him. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right at his edge. And as the owner of the assets, I'm afraid I have to inform you that your contract is being terminated for cause. Cause? What cause? Charlotte pressed a button on the remote. The large screen behind her flickered to life. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a series of photos. Ethan and Sienna at the Pierre. Ethan and Sienna in Cabo. Ethan using the company credit card to buy Sienna a Porsche. Embezzlement of company funds, Charlotte said coolly. Misappropriation of assets, and gross misconduct. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that echoed in the silent room. You wanted a divorce, Ethan. You wanted to be free. Congratulations. You're free. Now get out of my building. Ethan stood paralyzed in the boardroom. The silence was absolute, broken only by the hum of the projector fan cooling down. He looked at the board members, men he had golfed with, women he had charmed at galas. They were all studying their fingernails or looking out the window. They knew where the power lay, and it wasn't with him anymore. This is illegal, Ethan stammered, his voice cracking. I'll sue. I'll burn this place to the ground. Security, Charlotte said. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Two large men in dark blazers stepped out from the shadows near the service entrance. Ethan recognized one of them, Frank. Frank had been working the lobby desk for 5 years. Ethan had never once learned his last name or said good morning to him. Mr. Blackwood, Frank said, his face stone cold. Please come with us. Don't make a scene. Don't touch me. Ethan swatted Frank's hand away. He looked at Sienna, who was still standing near the door, clutching her designer purse, her face a mask of horror. Sienna, call the police. They're stealing my company. Sienna didn't move. She was staring at Charlotte. Or rather, she was staring at the massive emerald ring on Charlotte's right hand, a family heirloom that screamed old money louder than any bank statement. Sienna! Ethan yelled. I can't, Ethan, she whispered. Mr. Blackwood, Arthur interjected smoothly. Miss Tate's employment has also been terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort her out as well. We will mail her personal effects. Ethan was practically dragged into the elevator. The ride down from the 40th floor felt like a descent into hell. Frank stood between him and the buttons, silent. When the doors opened to the lobby, Ethan straightened his jacket, trying to muster some dignity. I'm walking out on my own, he hissed. He stepped out of the glass revolving doors onto Fifth Avenue and was immediately blinded by flashes. Dozens of photographers were waiting. A news van from CNBC was double-parked. Charlotte hadn't just fired him. She had orchestrated a public execution. "Mr. Blackwood, is it true you're under investigation for embezzlement?" "Ethan, did you know your wife was the majority owner?" Sienna, look over here." Ethan shielded his eyes, pushing through the mob. He grabbed Sienna's arm, pulling her toward where his driver usually waited. But the curb was empty. The Maybach was gone. Company property. "Damn it!" Ethan kicked a trash can. "We'll take a cab." He hailed a yellow taxi, shoving a protesting Sienna inside. As the cab pulled away from the chaos, he slumped back against the cracked vinyl seat, loosening his tie. "Okay," he panted, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Okay, this is a setback. Just a setback. Harrison's an idiot, but I can hire a real shark. We'll tie them up in court for years. I have savings. I have the offshore accounts." He turned to Sienna, looking for comfort. "Babe, we're going to be fine. It's you and me against the world, right?" Sienna was looking at her phone, scrolling furiously. "Ethan," she said, her voice flat, "my company credit card just got declined for my Uber account." "I'll fix it," he said, reaching for her hand. She pulled away. "And I'm reading a tweet from the Wall Street Journal. It says the Kensington Trust has frozen all assets associated with Ethan Blackwood pending a forensic audit." "Ethan, do you have any money? Like right now?" "It's temporary," Ethan snapped. "Why are you looking at me like that? I'm still Ethan Blackwood." "No," Sienna said, looking at him with a sudden, chilling clarity. "Ethan Blackwood is a billionaire CEO. You're just a guy in a suit who just lost his job and is being sued by his wife. Sienna, stop the cab," she yelled at the driver. "What? We're in the middle of traffic." "I said stop." The cab screeched to a halt. Sienna opened the door. "Where are you going?" Ethan cried. "I have a modeling casting," she lied. "Don't call me Ethan. I need space to process this." She slammed the door and vanished into the crowd. Ethan sat alone in the back of the cab, the meter ticking up, realizing he didn't have enough cash in his wallet to pay the fare to his apartment. 3 days later, Ethan was sitting in a cramped office in Queens, staring at a lawyer named Vinnie the Pitbull Moretti. The office smelled like stale cigars and cheap cologne. It was a far cry from the glass-walled firms Ethan was used to, but no reputable firm in Manhattan would touch him. Charlotte's influence, or rather the Kensington influence, had blackened his name instantly. "So let me get this straight," Vinnie said, chewing on the end of a toothpick. "You signed a divorce decree that explicitly waived rights to the business entity, but you missed the clause about the operational license being revocable?" "I didn't read it." Ethan slammed his fist on the metal desk. "My lawyer, Harrison. He was supposed to check it. I think she paid him off." "Hard to prove," Vinnie grunted. "And you say this Kensington Trust owns everything?" "Apparently. I thought her dad was just an antique dealer. He ran a dusty shop in London. They lived in a nice townhouse, sure, but I never saw this kind of power." Vinnie leaned forward, tapping his keyboard with thick fingers. "Kid, you didn't do your homework. I'm looking up the Kensington Trust on the deep web databases. This ain't antique money. This is empire money." Vinnie turned the monitor around. "Look at this. The antique shop? A front for a private collection. Her father, Lord Alastair Kensington, owns half the commercial real estate in Soho. He's a silent partner in 3 major banks. And his great-grandfather? He built the railroads that shipped the steel you build your skyscrapers with." Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. "She played me. For 12 years, she played the simple housewife." "She didn't play you," Vinnie chuckled darkly. "She just didn't correct you. You were so busy looking in the mirror, you didn't notice you were sleeping next to a sleeping dragon." "I want it back," Ethan said, his voice low and dangerous. "I don't care about the history. I built Blackwood Dynamics. The code, the client list, the algorithms that came from my head. They can keep the furniture. I want my intellectual property." "IP is tricky," Vinnie mused. If you developed it while under contract, they own it. Unless what? Unless you can prove that the original code, the source seed, was created before you signed the marriage certificate or the employment contract. If you can prove the foundation of the company predates the marriage, the matrimonial clause might not apply to the IP. You could sue for ownership of the tech, even if you lose the company's shell. Ethan's eyes lit up. He remembered the first version of the algorithm. He had written it in his dorm room a month before he met Charlotte. He had it saved on an old hard drive. "But where is it?" Ethan muttered. Then he remembered. The hard drive was in the safe in the master bedroom of the penthouse on 57th Street, the penthouse Charlotte was currently occupying. "I need to get into that apartment," Ethan said. "Bad idea," Vinny warned. "Restraining order. Trespassing. You get caught. You go to Rikers." "I won't get caught," Ethan said, standing up. "I know the security codes. I installed the system myself. Charlotte is old-fashioned. She never changes passwords. And tonight is the Met Gala. She has to go. It's a Kensington tradition. The apartment will be empty for at least 4 hours." "Ethan, don't do it," Vinny said, though he didn't look like he'd try hard to stop him. "This is a desperate move." "Desperate is all I have left," Ethan replied. He threw a wad of cash onto Vinny's desk. "Draft the paperwork for the IP lawsuit. I'll bring you the proof in the morning." Ethan walked out into the Queen's sunlight. He pulled his collar up. He wasn't the CEO anymore. He was a thief in his own life, and he was about to break into the castle he used to rule. The service elevator of the 57th Street penthouse was a steel cage that smelled of industrial cleaner and trash bags. It was a humiliating way to enter the building he used to own, but Ethan had no choice. The doorman, Frank, had been given strict instructions to call the NYPD if Ethan Blackwood so much as stepped onto the sidewalk. Ethan checked his watch. 8:17 p.m. The Met Gala red carpet was being live-streamed to millions. Charlotte would be there, draped in vintage Dior, smiling for the cameras, playing the role of the benevolent, triumphant heiress. The apartment should be empty for at least 4 hours. He punched the override code into the service keypad. 1984. It was his birth year. He had insisted on it being the master code for the building's back-end systems. It was a small stroke of ego that was now saving his life. The lift groaned, the gears catching, before slowly ascending towards the 50th floor. When the doors slid open into the utility room of the penthouse, the silence hit him like a physical weight. The apartment was bathed in the cool blue glow of the Manhattan skyline, filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. It was quiet. Too quiet. The hum of the Sub-Zero refrigerator, the faint tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, the distant siren from 30 stories down. It felt like walking into a mausoleum. Ethan crept into the hallway, his sneakers squeaking softly on the marble. He passed the living room. There was the Eames chair he used to sit in while he drank his scotch and ignored his wife. There was the abstract sculpture he had bought in Berlin for $250,000 to impress a venture capitalist. It all looked exactly the same, yet completely alien. The space didn't recognize him anymore. "Focus," he told himself, wiping sweat from his palms. "Get the drive. Get the proof. Get out." He moved toward the master suite. The door was ajar. He pushed it open and was immediately assaulted by the scent of her perfume, jasmine and sandalwood. It was faint, but it triggered a sudden, sharp pang in his chest that he angrily shoved down. He wasn't here for nostalgia. He was here for survival. He went straight to the walk-in closet. It was larger than most Manhattan apartments, lined with cedar shelves and custom lighting. He pushed aside a row of Charlotte's winter coats, revealing the hidden wall safe installed behind a false panel. "Okay," Ethan breathed, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Come on." He knew the make of the safe. He had ordered it himself. It was a biometric model, but it had a keypad override for emergencies. He typed in the code he had used for 10 years. 0412. Their wedding anniversary. The small LCD screen blinked red. Access denied. Damn it, Ethan hissed. Of course she'd changed it. He tried his birthday. Access denied. He tried the company's founding date. Access denied. He tried the date of his first $1 million sale. Access denied. Panic began to rise, cold and sharp. The keypad had a lockout feature. One more wrong attempt, and the silent alarm would trigger. The police would be here in 6 minutes. He would be arrested for burglary. It would be over. Ethan closed his eyes, leaning his forehead against the cold steel of the safe. Think like Charlotte. She wasn't like him. She didn't care about money, or birthdays, or anniversaries. Not anymore. She was sentimental about the truth. She was ruthless about the facts. What was the most important number to her right now? He remembered the look on her face in the boardroom, the cold, precise way she had slid the termination letter across the table. The date on that letter, October 14th, the day she took back her life. His hand trembled as he reached for the keypad. 1, 0, 1, 4. Click. The heavy steel bolt retracted with a sound that seemed to echo like a gunshot in the silent room. Ethan let out a jagged, broken breath. Got you! He pulled the door open. The safe was mostly empty. The jewelry was gone, likely moved to a bank vault. The cash was gone. But sitting on the bottom shelf, gathering dust, was the object of his salvation. The silver lacy external hard drive, labeled Source Seed, 2012. Ethan grabbed it, clutching it like a holy relic. This drive contained the original time-stamped code for the Blackwood algorithm. If he could show this to a judge, he could prove he invented the tech before the marriage assets were consolidated. He could sue her for intellectual property theft. He could burn Kensington Systems to the ground. I win, he whispered, a grin spreading across his face. As he pulled his hand back, his elbow clipped a stack of books sitting on the upper shelf of the safe. They tumbled down, hitting the floor with a heavy thud. Ethan jumped, nearly dropping the drive. He shone his phone's flashlight down. They weren't books. They were journals, leather-bound moleskin notebooks, numbered by year. 2011, 2012, 2013. Ethan frowned. Charlotte never kept a diary. She wasn't the type to write down her feelings. Curiosity, dangerous and magnetic, pulled him down. He crouched on the closet floor and picked up the notebook labeled 2011. He flipped it open. He expected to see grocery lists, or maybe complaints about him working too late. Instead, he saw code, pages and pages of handwritten Python script, algorithms, flowcharts, architectural diagrams for server load balancing. Ethan's eyes widened. He recognized the handwriting, Charlotte's neat, loopless cursive, and he recognized the code. Entry, November 3rd, 2011. Ethan is spiraling again. The compression algorithm keeps crashing when the data load exceeds 5 terabytes. He's been screaming at his monitor for 3 hours. He threw a mug against the wall. I told him to come to bed. Once he finally fell asleep, I went into the study. I looked at his kernel. It's a mess. He missed a recursive loop in line 400 that's causing a memory leak. I patched it. I rewrote the entire back-end structure to optimize for cloud scaling. It took me 6 hours. I'll upload it to his server before he wakes up. He'll think he fixed it in a dream. It's better this way. He needs the confidence. If he knows I did it, he'll stop trying. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. He grabbed the next notebook. 2014, the year Blackwood Dynamics went public. The year Fortune magazine put Ethan on the cover as the boy genius. Entry July 12th, 2014. The IPO is next week. The security protocols Ethan installed are a joke. A freshman CS student could hack this in 10 minutes. Ethan is too focused on the marketing roadshow to listen to me. I spent the last 3 nights building a firewall from scratch. I inserted it into the update package while he was in London. He took credit for the impenetrable security in the Bloomberg interview today. He actually believes he wrote it. I'm just glad we're safe. I don't need the applause. I just need him to be okay. Ethan dropped the notebook. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely hold the flashlight. He flipped through another one. 2018. Entry, March 4th, 2018. He's sleeping with his assistant. I know he is. I smell her perfume on his shirts. I should leave him. I should burn the servers and walk away. But the new update is due on Monday, and his code is full of bugs again. If I don't fix the API integration, the company stock will tank. The employees will lose their pensions. So I fixed it. I fixed his code while he was out with her. I am building a castle for a man who locks me in the tower. Oh my God, Ethan whispered. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't the genius. He had never been the genius. He was the mascot. For 12 years he had strutted around stages, accepted awards, and lectured rooms full of people on vision. And for 12 years his quiet, boring wife had been walking behind him with a broom, sweeping up his mess, fixing his errors, and keeping his empire from collapsing under the weight of his own incompetence. I found the bugs in the source seed drive too, by the way. The voice cut through the darkness like a knife. Ethan spun around, dropping the hard drive. It clattered onto the hardwood floor. The lights in the bedroom flared on, blinding him for a second. When his eyes adjusted, he saw her. Charlotte was sitting in the velvet armchair in the corner of the bedroom. She wasn't at the Met Gala. She wasn't wearing a gown. She was wearing simple silk pajamas and a robe, holding a glass of water. Her hair was down, loose around her shoulders. She looked calm. She looked rested. And she looked absolutely terrifying. "Charlotte!" Ethan gasped, scrambling backward until his back hit the closet door. The gala, the live stream." "A body double," Charlotte said, taking a sip of water. "I hate those events. The lights give me a migraine. Besides, I had a feeling you'd come tonight. You always were predictable when you're desperate, Ethan." Ethan looked at the notebooks scattered on the floor, then at the hard drive, then back at her. "Is this true? Did you write all of this?" "I fixed what was broken," Charlotte said. She stood up and walked toward him. She didn't look angry. She looked like a parent disappointed in a toddler. "You had the vision, Ethan. I'll give you that. You knew how to sell the dream. But you were a terrible coder. You were sloppy. You cut corners. You cared more about the launch date than the stability of the product. Why?" Ethan's voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me believe I was doing it?" "Because I loved you," she said simply. The past tense hung in the air, heavy and final. "I wanted you to feel big. I wanted you to be the man you thought you were. I didn't care about the credit, Ethan. I just wanted to build something together. I thought if I supported you enough, eventually you'd grow into the suit." She stopped a few feet from him, looking down at the scattered journals. "But you never grew," she said softly. "You just got meaner." Ethan looked at the hard drive on the floor, the source seed, the proof he had risked jail to get. It was worthless. If he took it to court, if these notebooks came out, he wouldn't just lose the lawsuit. He would be exposed as a fraud. His reputation wouldn't just be damaged. It would be vaporized. "I'm a fraud," Ethan whispered. The words tasted like ash. "Yes," Charlotte said, "but only because you refused to learn." She nudged the silver hard drive with her slippered foot. "Go ahead," she said. "Take it. Take the drive to your lawyer. Sue me. But know this. If you do, I will release the journals. I will release the version history logs. I will show the world that Ethan Blackwood can't even write a Hello World script without a syntax error." Ethan fell to his knees. The fight left him all at once. The arrogance, the anger, the entitlement. It all drained away, leaving him hollow. He covered his face with his hands and wept. It wasn't a cry of manipulation. It was the raw, ugly sound of a man watching his own reflection shatter. "I'm sorry," he sobbed into his hands. "Charlotte, I am so sorry." Charlotte watched him cry. Her expression softened, but only slightly. There was pity there, but the warmth was gone. The door that had been open for 12 years was shut and bolted. "I know you are," she said. "But apologies don't rewrite code, Ethan, and they don't fix broken trust." She walked over to the nightstand and picked up her phone. "Don't call the police," Ethan begged, looking up, his eyes red and swollen. "Please, I'll leave. I'll disappear. Just don't put me in a cage." Charlotte paused, her thumb hovering over the screen. She looked at the man on the floor, a broken shell of the husband she once adored. She could destroy him right now. She could send him to Rikers Island for breaking and entering. She could ruin his name in the press tomorrow. But she looked at the journals. She remembered the nights she sat up fixing his code, not because she had to, but because she loved him. That love was gone, but the memory of it demanded mercy. "You have 24 hours to leave New York," she said. Her voice was steel. "I will buy out your remaining shares at the current market value, which is 0, considering the debt you've racked up. I will give you a clean slate. No debt, no lawsuit. But you sign a watertight NDA. You never mention my family, this company, or these notebooks again. You go find a life that you can actually handle, a life where you do your own work." "I'll do it," Ethan whispered. "I'll go." "Good," Charlotte said. She turned her back to him. "Frank is waiting in the hall to escort you out. Leave the key fob on the counter." "Charlotte?" She didn't turn around. "Goodbye, Ethan." Ethan stood up on shaky legs. He looked at her back one last time, the straight spine, the proud shoulders. He looked at the hard drive on the floor, the symbol of his lie. He left it there. He walked out of the bedroom, past the security guard waiting in the shadows, and stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, cutting off his view of the penthouse, Ethan Blackwood realized he was leaving with exactly what he started with, nothing but himself. And for the first time, he knew exactly how little that was worth. New York City, 6 months later. The transformation of the 40th floor was total. The heavy, suffocating mahogany panels that Ethan had installed to intimidate visitors were gone. In their place stood floor-to-ceiling glass walls, sleek Danish mid-century furniture, and open-plan collaborative spaces. The air no longer smelled of stale scotch and fear. It smelled of espresso and productivity. The sign behind the reception desk was modest, brushed steel against white stone. Kensington Systems. Charlotte sat in the corner office, but she wasn't behind a desk. She was standing by the window, looking down at the ant-sized yellow cabs crawling along Fifth Avenue. She held a tablet in one hand, reviewing the Q4 earnings report. The numbers were staggering. Since ousting Ethan and purging the bro-culture toxicity from the sales floor, efficiency was up 40%. The stock price hadn't just recovered. It was trading at an all-time high of $214 a share. There was a soft knock on the glass door. "Mrs. Kensington." It was Arthur. The quiet man who had served her father, and now served her, walked in with a tablet and a steaming cup of tea. He looked as unflappable as ever, though his suit was perhaps a shade sharper than before. "The team from Wired magazine is setting up in the conference room," Arthur said, "and the representatives from Sequoia Capital are on line 1. They want to discuss the Series B expansion for the AI division." Charlotte took the tea, inhaling the jasmine steam. "Tell Sequoia to wait. If they want in, they play on our timeline. And tell the Wired team I'll be there in 10 minutes. I want to finish reviewing the code for the encryption patch." Arthur smiled, a rare, genuine expression. "You know, your father would be terrifyingly proud of you. You run this place with an iron fist, but you wear a velvet glove." "Ethan ran it with an iron fist," Charlotte corrected gently, turning back to the window. "I run it with competence. There's a difference." "Speaking of him," Arthur hesitated. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and produced a physical envelope. It was cheap, white paper, slightly crumpled at the corners. The handwriting was jagged, penned in blue ballpoint ink. This arrived in the mailroom this morning. Security scanned it. It's clean. Postmarked from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Charlotte stared at the letter. For a moment, the hum of the office faded. She felt a phantom echo of the old anxiety, the feeling of being small, of being the trophy wife in the beige cardigan. But it passed as quickly as it came. She was the CEO. She was the architect. "Thank you, Arthur," she said, taking the envelope. "Give me a moment." Arthur nodded and quietly withdrew, closing the glass door. Charlotte sat on the edge of the low sofa and slit the envelope open with her fingernail. Inside was a single photograph and a folded sheet of notebook paper. She looked at the photo first. It was grainy, likely taken by a passerby on a phone. It showed a small, snow-dusted storefront wedged between a dry cleaner and a vape shop. The sign above the door was hand-painted on plywood, EB Tech Repair. Ethan was in the photo. He was standing in the doorway, wearing a heavy, grease-stained Carhartt jacket and a beanie. He had a beard, thick, unkempt, peppered with premature grey. He was holding a wrench and smiling at a dog sitting at his feet. It wasn't the shark-like grin he used to flash for the cameras. It was a tired, small, human smile. She unfolded the letter. "Charlotte, I know I'm not supposed to contact you. If you want, you can send this to the lawyers and have them revoke the settlement. I wouldn't blame you. I'm not writing to ask for money. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve either. I'm writing because yesterday I spent 4 hours fixing a motherboard for a grandmother who wanted to recover photos of her late husband. When I finally got the drive to spin up, she cried. She hugged me. She gave me $20 and a tin of cookies. It felt better than the day we rang the bell at the NASDAQ. I'm learning Python. I bought a 4 Dummies book. I'm on chapter 4. It's hard. My logic is sloppy. You were right about the recursive loops. I still get stuck on them. I finally understand what you did for me all those years. I was standing on a mountain you built, screaming that I could fly. Thank you for the exit. Thank you for the humiliation. It was the only way I was ever going to wake up. Congratulations on the Forbes cover. You look like a queen. Charlotte read the letter twice. She traced the jagged signature with her thumb. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel angry. She felt a profound sense of closure, like a heavy book finally being clicked shut. She stood up, walked to the shredder by her desk, and fed the letter into the machine. She watched the paper turn into confetti. She kept the photo. She slipped it into the bottom drawer of her desk, underneath her father's pocket watch. A reminder. "Okay," she whispered to the empty room. She straightened her blazer, checked her reflection in the glass, and walked out to meet the press. She had an empire to run. Underscore, 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 Cedar Rapids, Iowa, that same evening. The wind in Iowa cut different than the wind in Manhattan. It didn't swirl around skyscrapers. It came sweeping across the flat plains, carrying ice crystals that stung the skin like needles. The bell above the door of EB Tech Repair jingled. "We're closed," Ethan called out from the back room. He was hunched over a workbench, illuminated by a magnifying lamp. The smell of solder and burnt flux hung heavy in the air. "Just need a pickup, Ethan," a voice called back. Ethan looked up, wiping his eyes. It was Mrs. Gable. She was 80 years old and drove a Buick that was older than she was. Ethan stood up, his knees cracking. He wasn't wearing an Italian suit. He was wearing flannel and jeans that were fraying at the hem. He walked to the front counter. "Mrs. Gable," Ethan smiled. "I thought you were coming tomorrow. The roads are getting bad." "Oh, pish," she waved a gloved hand. "I survived the blizzard of 78. I can handle a little flurry. Is my toaster ready?" "It is," Ethan said. He reached under the counter and pulled out a vintage 1950s chrome toaster. The heating element was shot, and the wiring was a fire hazard. I resoldered the connections and replaced the cord. It should toast evenly now. No more burnt edges. Mrs. Gable looked at the toaster like it was a gold bar. You're a miracle worker, Ethan. Everyone else told me to buy a new one. But I like this one. It makes the bread taste better. Old things are worth fixing, Ethan said quietly. Most of the time. How much do I owe you? $5 for the parts, Ethan said. Labor is on the house. You're a terrible businessman, Mrs. Gable scolded him affectionately, slapping a $20 bill on the counter. Keep the change. Buy yourself a hot dinner. You look skinny. She took her toaster and bustled out into the cold. Ethan locked the door behind her and flipped the sign to closed. He stood there for a moment in the silence of the shop. It was a small life. He made $30,000 a year. He lived in a one-bedroom apartment above a bakery. He didn't have a driver, a penthouse, or a reputation. He walked back to his workbench. Next to his soldering iron was a thick, dog-eared book, Advanced Coding Principles and Algorithms. He sat down, opened a container of leftover fried rice, and opened the book to where he had left off. He was struggling with a concept called polymorphism. He stared at the code examples. A year ago, he would have thrown the book across the room and screamed at an assistant to figure it out for him. He would have bluffed his way through a meeting, using buzzwords to hide his ignorance. But tonight, he just sighed, picked up a pencil, and started writing notes in the margins. If Charlotte could fix the kernel in 6 hours, he muttered to himself, I can figure this out in 6 months. He worked until midnight. The shop was freezing, the heater rattling in the corner, but Ethan didn't notice. For the first time in his life, he wasn't pretending to be smart. He was actually learning. He packed up his bag, turned off the magnifying lamp, and walked to the door. Before he left, he pulled his phone out. He didn't have social media anymore, but he had a saved bookmark. He tapped it. The screen loaded a news article from TechCrunch. Kensington Systems announces record profits. The subheadline read, Under the visionary leadership of Charlotte Kensington, the tech giant has revolutionized data security. Ethan looked at the photo of his ex-wife. She looked strong. She looked untouchable. He felt a pang in his chest. Regret, sharp and familiar. He remembered the smell of her perfume. He remembered the way she used to look at him, before the money poisoned everything. He had lost the best thing that ever happened to him, because he was too busy staring at himself in the mirror. But as he looked at the photo, the regret slowly settled into something else. Respect. Go get 'em, Char, he whispered into the cold dark. He put the phone in his pocket, pulled his collar up against the wind, and stepped out into the snow. He had a long walk home, and he had work to do in the morning. Underscore, 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 underscore. And so the balance of the universe was restored. Ethan Blackwood lost $1 billion empire, but in the ruins of his ego, he found something he never had before. His own hands. He learned the hard way that you can't build a legacy on someone else's labor. Charlotte didn't just take back her company. She took back her narrative. She proved that true power isn't about who shouts the loudest in the boardroom. It's about who actually knows how to keep the lights on. It's a bittersweet ending, isn't it? Charlotte rose to the height of her potential, and Ethan finally started his climb from the bottom, the right way this time. This story ended with mercy. Charlotte let him go, and Ethan found a quiet peace. But was that too soft? If you were Charlotte, would you have destroyed him completely for the years of lies? Or is living a humble life the ultimate punishment for a man like Ethan? Let me know your verdict in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story gave you chills, do me a favor and hit that like button. It helps us create more high-quality drama like this. And if you haven't already, smash subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode of stories that feel a little too real. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you step on while you're climbing the ladder. They might just be the one holding it up.